Greetings! I'm Fire Lotus, and welcome back to another live Witches Chat. So, we do have a lot of things to talk about today, and I'm excited about it. Also, maybe going through a slight manic episode, so there's going to be an intense energy, and I'm on my second pot of coffee. So, it's going to be a wild ride. But I'm not going to be able to go live very long today, because I got a bunch of shit to do. But anyways, hi, hello. I am Fire Lotus for the people that do not know, and I've been doing these for about 4. I've been doing these for about 3 to 4 years. Good morning. And yes, definitely had to. What the? Oh, that's what I heard earlier. Okay, sorry, ADD moment. So we're gonna talk about a things. We're definitely gonna be talking about a couple of things that has currently been going on. Also gained another follower on this page, so hi, hello. Okay, for one, we have a Discord. If y'all like to join, it's in the link tree. We have the manifestation jar coming up at the end of this month. The 31st is the cutoff date. And then next month, I'll be doing a self-love community candle for the entire community, which is free. So I made a video because there's been this talk in the witchy community about how the devil is not in witchcraft. Okay, before I get into this, the concept that I'm talking about, I'm not talking about the Christian concept of the devil. Okay, so Christian-wise, I'll say Lucifer, devil-wise, Horned One, Man in Black, Blacksmith, that's what we're talking about as in the devil. It's an archetype, though. Because there's a really, really good Welsh creator who came out with a Welsh witchcraft book, and they also just make amazing content. And it circulated, and then I started seeing other videos that's like, the devil's not in witchcraft, and I'm like, have you not picked up a book? And I mentioned that, and they're like, well, no, because I mentioned the Witch Father, and like, the Witch Father came from Hollywood. For one... Oh, I thought you were going to say Pan. Pan is actually I'm going to tie a lot of these things in together. But for one, the Witch Father. And they're like, well, the Witch Father was from Hollywood. For one, you do realize most of Hollywood gets most of their ideas from folklore or stuff like that, right? Okay, so we're there with that. Now, what's interesting in the reason that I say it's interesting that you mentioned Pan was because on the episode of my podcast, I think it's like Scrolling Through the Woods with the Traditional Witch. Brian, he used to be Wiccan, just like I did. And when he was Wiccan, he worked with Pan. He was extremely drawn to him. And I asked him the question. Deja vu, I feel like we've had this conversation before. Anyways, I was like, so wait, now that you're a traditional witch and you work with the Witch Father, do you believe that Pan, or the energy that showed you it was Pan, do you actually think it was the Witch Father? And he's like, actually, yeah, it makes sense. And what my theory that I ran on that was, okay, so we're just going to name him the Witch Father, right? There's also another magical theory, kind of conspiratorial, to where that actually may have been one of Cain's descendants. Hold that thought. Oh, okay. I'm having issues getting a package or not getting the package. Anyways, and I was like, so what about this? Like, humor me for a second. What if the Witch Father realized that witchcraft was basically kind of completely dying out? So he went to one person in particular that eventually created what we now know as Wicca. And he thought about it, and he goes, actually, that's actually... Because I straight up asked him, I was like, okay, so the Witch Father... Is it like a deity, or is it more like an archetype, which means depending on where you're at in the world is depending on what actions or activity you're going to get from it? And he's like, yes. So somebody else asked me, like, what is the Witch Father and or Witch Mother? Basically, they're masculine and feminine aspects of nature, which is one of the reasons when I say the Witch Father, or most people, when they hear the devil, they automatically go to the horned god, Pan, or multiple other horned gods. But there's a difference. The horned god that I primarily talk about, or that I associate the Witch Father with, doesn't have like bull horns, he has stag horns, a deer, which is also interesting because I've always been drawn to like the skeleton of a deer and never knew why until now. Like when I picked up, actually this was the first book that really kind of mentioned the Witch Father. There's an entire chapter in this book on it. I was like, wait, hold the fuck up. And then I actually got to read The Crooked Path. Hands down, an amazing book. There are exercises in that book. I love it. But I was like, wait, a lot of this makes sense. If you've been with me for a while, you know the shadow meditation that I was talking about where I saw an entity. But it wasn't bad nor good. It was just old. I believe it was an aspect of the Witch Father. Because there's another podcast. What is it? Is it Living Witchcraft? I think it may be Living Witchcraft. It's a male and female. I think they pronounce themselves like that. I've always heard anyone depict the horned ones as great in manifesting things on earth rapidly fast. I've also heard of that too. But in the podcast that I'm talking, I want to say it's Living Witchcraft. Because it's anyways, male and female, feminine. I'm not trying to misgender anybody. But in the episode, in one of the episodes, and I'll post it after this is live, I'll post a link to it because it's a really good episode. They actually, one of the female that's in there, she works with the Witch Father. And it took her going out on the edge of town during... I have no idea what that is. And it was like cold, slightly cold, and it started to rain. So she's sitting on this stump meditating. And eventually, after her sitting there in the freezing rain, basically in a very, very uncomfortable situation, the Witch Father revealed himself. Now, in American folklore, you'll hear the Witch Father, which I'm about to look a couple of things up in here. You'll hear either the Witch Father, the Horned One, the Man in Black, aka the guy that supposedly walked around Salem that showed up to the practitioners and had their book signed in the thing. One of the most popular books, old school books, is hold that thought. I want to make sure I get this name right. Come on. First name. The Silver Bullet. The Silver Bullet. And from my understanding with that, oops, sorry about that. I'm all over the place today. From my understanding in that book, because I've not been able to get a copy of it because on Amazon it's either out of print and or very expensive. But it's basically a book of old school folklore. Now, that's where we get into the nitty-gritty about American folklore, because that's also where, like, the bones that you see people online... Before I say this, I do not encourage this at all. Use chicken bones. But in there, that's where you kind of have to... Well, if you read Backwoods Witchcraft, you know what I'm about to say. So, trigger warning. They would actually get a black cat, and let's just say they would use the bones from that. But again, the person who was like, well, there's no devil in the witchcraft, literally flipped to the back of this book. Now, this is primarily American folklore. The devil, literally an entire subcategory of stories that mention the devil, the horned one. The devil's tramping ground, which is actually really cool. And eventually I will make a video more in depth on this. But the problem that we're having with this is Christianity, basically. Because everybody is just same with demons, it's the same with Satan or the devil. It's the Christian aspect of it that people can't get away from. Like me and my partner, that's the one thing we don't talk about because, well, we have different views on that. And let me tell you, when he found out that I was working or will be working with a couple of newer things, he was very shocked and surprised. But the reason I'm bringing this up is because people are saying that it's misinformation. And it's not, because even in European or basically in all different aspects of the world throughout history, the devil has been there. Now, what confuses me is I don't understand in the Bible, I do, because it's humans, of how we went from Lucifer, Morningstar, being the most gorgeous angel to ever be created, to when he fell from hell, he became this horned god, or like this, you know, pitchfork guy. Um, but in general, the energy of the Witch Father, it is intense. It's extremely intense, but it's not good nor bad. Now, the female version, the Witch Mother, I've actually heard that her appearance is more like fall. Yes, the Christian aspect and the understanding of spirit realms and spirit deities generally condemn them in most of us. Exactly, and that's like, I hate it, because there's the most famous quote in the Bible, if you're a witch, which is basically, no, wait, am I thinking of the, witch, I think I'm thinking of the witch's hammer. No, I think it is in the Bible, which is basically, thou shalt not suffer a witch to live. And I'm like, speaking of that, we get the bad name, but there was a priest and his wife who just got arrested for having 6 adults locked up in their basement, controlling their medication and finances. But, you know, we're still the angry ones here, or the evil ones here. And it's so funny, because if you look at, like, how some of the folklore and superstitions revolving around witches started, it's really funny. I guess 18 plus warning on this. So we all know the images of witches flying on broomsticks. Do you actually know what that meant? So, and you can actually get this now, although I would highly recommend you doing as much research before you buy from anybody of what I'm about to mention, which is flying ointment. Now, there are very different varieties of flying ointment. Some modern day ones, they'll use mugwort or wormwort versus what they used to use before. But this flying ointment was basically a hallucinogenic. So they would either A, rub the bottom of their feet, or B, well, they would ride a broom. They would literally ride it. Because of how the body works down there, it's basically the psychoactives will get straight to it. I feel like the symbols help to reinforce the devil and the stubbornness determined of the rebellions. Like pitchfork makes me think hard work. And moms do not grab your torches and pitchforks. Exactly, and I also love how you worded that. But yes, exactly. It's supposed to be, the devil is supposed to be like the most rebellious. That's one of the reasons in the Satanic Church, that's the reason they use Baphomet. Baphomet's not a devil, but that's the reason they used it. All the symbols that they use in the Satanic Church, they used it for a reason, which was to mock the original meanings that they used. I feel like I missed something very interesting to hear about. But, with riding on the brooms, though, that's what they basically did. So, obviously, men back then saw a woman riding her broom and or jumping the hedge. Depending on your tradition, you'll hear journaling, or you'll hear flying, jumping the hedge, going out of the skin. There's another one. There are certain traditional witches, they'll use a skeleton key as a symbolic of unlocking them. Neighbors, get your dog. Thank you. Okay. Sorry, my neighbor has 2 dogs, and one of them is very slender and like a racing dog, I guess. And every now and then he gets excited when he sees the cats, so he'll chase them. But normally he's good at like stopping them. But yeah, they would basically hallucinate and or dream work in a way. And it's interesting because just that history in it itself, it's very interesting. But you can actually buy, good morning, hope everyone is doing well. Same, good morning. But you can actually buy flying ointments online now, especially with Etsy shops. There's Poison Apothecary. That's one to check out. I've been following him for a while, and he also recently just came out with a book of Poison Apothecary, or Working the Poisonous Path. But it's very interesting to see how some of these folklore surrounding us got started and how they are now. Like, because we use brooms nowadays as cleansing the circles or protective items, flying ointment, astral chopper, right? Yes and no. It basically, yes, but they don't see it as necessarily astral traveling. But yes, it's journaling. It's basically projecting yourself out of your body. That's also what the whole Black Sabbath. That's what they were supposed to do. They were all flying and or jumping the hedge, which I believe the term jumping the hedge historically comes from more of like the UK, Scottish, Ireland, Welsh, that area, because they have a lot of the hedge walls there. Um, but it's extremely interesting because obviously you can make a flying ointment now, but again, make sure you know what you're doing, especially if you have any, like me, bipolar, anything like that. Watch what you're doing. Now, with that being said, some of the best places to put them, and I learned this because I had Coven of the Live Oak, which I think they're still around. I'm not for sure. Sent me last Yule. They sent me a package, and it had I'm gonna butcher this, Dantra, I think I said that. It can be used as a flying ointment. And where you would put this is either right here, behind your ear, on your feet, the bottom of your feet, basically places that can absorb it through the skin, or what they used to do. But it's interesting of how we get from flying on the broom to now. And at the same time, certain things have changed and then others haven't. Because I've met grown adults, we'll be having a conversation, and then all of a sudden they find out that I'm a witch, and the entire conversation just goes quiet. And I'm like, we live in 2022. We have horror movies, we have haunted attractions. I'm interested in covens, but I'm scared I'll end up in a cult instead. Eat, LOL. Honestly, before joining a coven, and I encourage anybody to do this because I have issues with covens primarily because, before I say this, I know that there are multiple covens, probably hundreds of them, that work perfectly. But the whole power dynamic, I don't like. Basically, I'm an Aries, so having to answer to somebody, I just don't like. Study group, that's one thing. But look up the like red flags of what most cult leaders follow, and just make sure none of them fall into that like section of it, and you should be great. And then also there have been a couple of issues where I've met with covens, and let's just say they were not on my level. Not that I was like advanceder than them. They just mixed a little LARPing in with it. And see, I have an issue with that too, because when I first started witchcraft, I was 11, 12, 13, right? Obviously, my favorite shows back then, Charmed, Buffy, all of that, right? I did use multiple spells from those shows. Now, what I mean by that was, do I think that I would actually turn invisible? No. Like, I created this spell to basically speed up or slow down time. Now, I've told people that before, and they're like, oh, okay, so you're one of those. And I'm like, no. It doesn't actually affect time. It affects your perception of time. And it's very easy. You stare at a clock and say, time is slow, time is fast, make the time fly by fast. Or, time is fast, time is slow, make the time flow by slow. Just be very careful with that, because it's extremely powerful. I'm a solitary witch in practice, but I've met so many people who automatically dismiss me because I'm a witch. I'm a witch, and they're coming from a flawed understanding without interest in learning from a practitioner. Honestly, I've had the same incidences where, like, I've met other practitioners. I actually lived with one who had an actual coven, and just really did not like their energy. And then, not to mention that story, a little backstory behind that, because I'm not giving out any names. So, the group that I'm talking about are actual Wiccans, as in it is a branch of Wicca that stems from Canada that is very, very heavy. And I mean, I've seen pictures of their gatherings. They had over 1,000 people there. But there are a couple of red flags that I learned right off the bat. They showed me, invisibility to me doesn't mean invisibility just helps you blend in more. Yes, exactly. With invisibility spells, that's exactly what it does. And then I'll tie back into that coven. Charmed, perfect example of that. They have a spell to where it's oh my god, think brain. What you see is not what it is. Basically, it's like where all the times that like their house has been completely destroyed, they'll say that thing and it just makes everything go back to normal, or it throws an illusion that everything is normal. I used to remember that spell by heart too. I've used that, but not in the stance that like you were saying. What I mean by that is, say for an example, I did an invisibility spell on this cup, right? Say I was having people over. So I could have this cup directly in front of you or directly on my altar, but the way those invisibility spells work is they basically distract you from seeing the object in plain sight. So it basically affects your perception to where you'll look at everything else, but you will never, this will not actually pop out to you. That's what an invisibility spell, there we go, is in real life. It doesn't make it actually invisible, it just kind of hides it from being in plain sight. And they do work, trust me. How do you think I got away with a lot of things that I used to have in my room that I wasn't supposed to when I lived with my stepfather? But with this coven, they would have, like, you would get a teacher, and then you would have to hand copy their spell book exactly on part. You could not add to it. You were just copying information. And I'm like, okay, red flag number one. And then I actually met some of these people, but it was the leader of it, because the leader, so my ex-roommate's mentor was the one that was originally running the coven. My roommate, or ex-roommate, undercut her and then turned around and took the entire coven and turned the entire coven on her. And then eventually after we moved out, everything fell apart. But I was like, when it comes to covens and witchcraft, the one thing you do not do is you never say fuck you to your mentor. Like, even the two mentors that I have, and hopefully one day I will actually get to meet her again, I would never do that though, like, at all. And I've had a couple of like online groups, but it never really went anywhere, because there's always that one person who tries to step up and was like, I think I have the power to lead this. And I'm like, no. The idea of a coven, to me, I like the community part. Like, that's straight up, that's what I like. I like the community and like the close-knittedness, but I don't know, it's always weird to me. But that, and I'm also a solitary practitioner, which means like there are only, I can probably count them on my hands, of people that have actually seen me full on do magic. I mean, obviously my partner has seen it, but when we first got together, that was still a place that like I was still slightly hesitant of. And it's just because I'm always afraid that somebody's going to come up and be like, no, stop, that's not how that works. And I'm like, yeah, it is. I've been doing it for this long for a reason. Which is also something I wanted to talk about, which is the rights and wrongs of witchcraft, which theoretically there are no rights and wrong, but it gets confusing. And the best way that I can put this is, there is no right or wrong way to do witchcraft. With that being stated, though, there are guidelines. As in, somebody who just picked it up and started, I would not suggest them picking up the Higher or Lesser Keys of Solomon and start using those seals. Why? Because summoning something is very easy. Calling something to you is very easy. Hold that thought. What are you going through? Sorry. Bubber's is shaking the entire damn table. But there are things that you can easily summon something to you. You can easily call it. Calling a deity, drawing down a deity. That's one thing. You have to also make sure you know how to respectfully dismiss them. Because there are some energies, and I'm going to start saying energies because I don't necessarily want to say spirits. There are some energies that you can summon. If you do not do certain things properly, either A, they won't show up, or B, when they do show up, they're going to let you know. Because it's about respect. It's etiquette. There's cursing etiquette. There's hexing etiquette. There's tarot etiquette. There's oracle etiquette. And it's basically just meaning be respectful. That's one of the reasons that a lot of necromancers these days, they either A, will not call themselves a necromancer, or B, they'll just say they're a death witch. Due to the Hollywood and stigma of, like, you know, the them being evil and stuff like that. Have I met necromancers that will actually straight up do what necromancer is, which is basically they do not care what they're doing with that spirit. If they want to bind that spirit and turn it into a slave or something like that, will they? Yes. Now, what I mean by that is the older aspect of necromancy. From my understanding, that was a practitioner who would go out and basically bind their will, or basically make a spirit bind their will and control them and or bind them to a certain object. Am I against that? Yes, just because I myself as a spirit would not want that. Which is one of the reasons that when we talked about the ancestor jar and or spirit jar, to make sure that unless you fully want to and how you view that, do not use dirt from an ancestral grave. Make your own dirt. Easy recipe for that. It's my recipe, but you can totally tweak it and change it. Coffee grounds, dried coffee grounds, just dirt. Now I do actually like using planter dirt with it just because of the like darker aspect of it. Ground up eggshells, whatever herbs you associate with spirit communication, and then that be your base layer to the jar, and then just mix it. So Chucky doll would be an example of a necromancy binding. Yes, actually, thank you for that. I love this. I love how we're also using like modern pop culture references. But yes, exactly. Chucky would wholeheartedly be a necromancer binding spell, because it was literally, that's what he was doing. He was binding his, or he was transferring his soul into the doll. There's another pop culture reference which would be the perfect example of an egregore, and now I can't think of it. Theoretically, when we're talking about egregores, theoretically the crucifixion is an egregore. Because broad definition of an egregore is a sentient being, possibly a sentient being, that was created due to a mass consciousness. So that's where crucifixions or crosses get their powers at. Not only have they been used in witchcraft and other magical practices as the equal arm cross, and to also represent the four elements, but you have so many people, either through fear or through just blind faith, that has put so much belief into that. So over time, it in itself becomes a very, very powerful object. Now, with that being said, if a demon, straight up demon, like, or negative aspect, straight up popped up in my house, would I grab a cross? No. I would grab my own little tools. Now, with that as well, I did want to mention something, and I wish that there were more terms. So, the stereotypical aspect of a demon, there are those. What I mean by that is, we're also going to get into, like, paranormal stuff. And these are some of the hauntings that you can experience. So we have residual and non-residual. The difference between both of those, one knows they're dead and the other one is just living their life out. They have no idea they're dead. Now, the non-residual, unless I got that backwards, the non-residual are the spirit that doesn't understand they're dead. These are the spirit activities that wind up coming alive when you start renovating a house. Why is that? Well, to them, in the spirit world, their house is the exact same that they've always done there, and then all of a sudden, these random strangers are coming in, ripping shit up. Obviously, it's going to stir up something. And then we have non-human entities. Non-human entities sometimes should scare the shit out of you, because they are what they preach from the Bible. With that being said, are you going to have to sell your soul? No. Do they want your soul? Do they want your body? Possibly. What I mean by this is, if we think of a non-human entity, which is very negative, in this aspect and in this example, it is extremely negative, what do they want? Even demons from the Bible, what do they want? Most people are like, purity. No, they want property. They want life. They want something that they don't have. And then I also think it's like this weird, like, tally mark of, like, you know, because if you look at all the historical, interesting fact, the original story that inspired the Exorcist movies happened in Maryland to a boy. But with that being said, and it also goes into, apparently his aunt was into the occult and she brought a Ouija board and then all this shit started happening. Great movies. The scariest Exorcist movie I've ever seen is Emily Rose. That movie fucked me up mentally because it's based on a very true story. But that would be like the actual thing. When it comes to depression, or when it comes to oppression or possession, it's not like in the movies where all of a sudden the demons just boom, it's in you. No. What you'll go through, and negative spirits can do this as well. It doesn't necessarily have to be a non-human spirit. But it doesn't just happen unless you give it permission. What winds up happening is you go through stages that's called oppression. Basically, this is that entity beating you down to find a crack to jump in. Now, this gets slightly confused. I'll talk about what I was about to talk about in a second. But non-human energies or basically human spirits, they can be actually nasty. Now, these are different from poltergeist. Poltergeist, from my understanding, are built through psychokinetic energy, primarily of younger kids, primarily of females coming into age due to the fact that their hormones are all over the place. And what winds up happening is they have a psychic ability, or they are very gifted. And what winds up happening with that is that psychokinetic energy builds up, and thus it creates its own thing. Emily Rose bored me into falling asleep, LOL. Felt so long and drawn out. I woke up to a corpse scream, fell back asleep. Should I try the movie again? I would definitely try that movie again. I will admit, I will agree with you, though. It is very slow. But that last scene with, like, the fog and, like, she's, like, at the fence and the tree, it just creeped me out. Now, that's actually my goal for this year, is to actually legit find a movie that will creep me the fuck out. Interesting fact, though, I will not watch, and if y'all want to laugh at me, y'all totally can. I will not watch any horror movies involving werewolves if I am home alone. One thing, I don't know why, like, demon, let's go. Let's, come on. Let's show some hands. When it comes to a Sasquatch and a werewolf, those are the only two things that would legit, I would just be like, all right, spirits, take me now. I'm good. You can, nope. And it's just because, like, what would you do in that situation? Because we don't have guns in this house. Am I supposed to fight it off with a fork? I love the werewolves. No, I love werewolf movies. I totally do. One movie that fucked me up when I was younger was Dog Soldiers. Holy shit, that movie fucked me up. But yeah, just at nighttime alone, those are the only movies that I will not watch. Because in my head, the irrational fear that, like, I'm going to be looking out my window and then, because y'all have to realize, the trailer that I live in, it's like 10 to 15 feet off the ground. So, like, if I walk outside and I try to, like, try to look in my, window, depending on what window you're trying to look into, there's no normal human person that should be able to do that. So I would legit lose my shit. I'd like to bite me, make me one of yours. That would be cool too, I'm not even gonna lie. And actually, believe it or not, werewolves, outside of what most people think skinwalkers are, werewolves also play a huge part in certain aspects of witchcraft. If you want to fall down a rabbit hole that's actually enjoyable, start looking up werewolf lore. Like, straight up, you will fall down a rabbit hole. Because there are some that, like, it was a curse. There are some where, like, very interesting. And even throughout history, there are incidences of where people have legit seen, you know, things that, true enough, most of these were, like, way back in the day versus, like, now. But, there's a few podcasts that I listen to. Scary Stories, that's a really good one. Is it Scary Stories? I'll make a list or a video of all the ones that I listen to because, like, if we ever have a moment where we have bad weather and the power gets knocked out, me and my partner started this tradition, which, this is also a cool tradition for y'all to start as well. Where we live at, we're like 45 minutes away, depending on how fast you drive and what way you take from, like, the biggest city. But at the same time, we're also in a point to where, like, I could go that direction and go to a big city, that direction, but it takes a while. So what we started doing was we have podcasts, primarily Necrochromapod. that we listen to when we go. So that entire trip, instead of listening to the radio, we'll be listening to that. But there was one night our power got knocked out for like 2 days. And we didn't have anything to do, but we had the car so we could charge our phones. And we started listening to podcasts. Oh my God, if you want to have like an adult sleepover, as in where it feels like you're a kid, get some spooky stories, turn out all the lights, and like have like a couple candles lit, and just gather around and listen to some of the podcasts. It's actually a really cool feeling. There's one that we love, which is called Conspiracy Theories, but they go over everything. Spooky, supernatural. That's another one. It's called Supernatural. They're really short, but really good. And it's just, I don't know what it is about, like, it almost, because I was not born around the era that I'm about to mention, but I have a belief that I had a short past life during that time, which was before TVs, where people would gather around their, like, old school radios and, like, and they would have certain shows that would basically be what modern day podcasts are now, but for the entire family. Mwah, I love moments like that, and I don't know why. It's very weird. While I'm speaking of podcast, if you haven't already, you should totally check out Southern Fried Witch. Oh my God, you're gonna love that podcast. I personally know her, and she's amazing. There's a very interesting story with her too that actually was state-wise in Alabama. It made news everywhere. But that's not my story to tell. Back to the whatchamacallit. So when it comes to like hauntings and non-hauntings, like the property, because most hauntings do kind of fit, they're supposed to be able to fit into those categories. Non-residual, residual, non-human spirit. You have the poltergeist. There's like 2 other ones that I'm not remembering correctly. But normally hauntings fall into those categories, or possibly all of those categories. The Conjuring, the movie series, most people do not know that there are actually the Conjure family, basically. One of the daughters in that actually wrote a book series. The first one is called, I think it's House of Dark, House of Night, House of Light, or House of Dark, House of Light. They go into very, very detailed, and I mean detailed, experiences that they had. And in The Conjuring, what they do not mention in the movies is they also had alien activity there as well. An interesting fact as well, on the first Conjuring movie, the original family flew out there, except for the mother. The mother slipped. I think she had slipped, and she was in the hospital. But the mother is the one who dealt with Bathsheba. So the daughters that are grown-ups now get to the set, and they're walking on the set, and all of a sudden a wind came out of fucking nowhere and split the entire set, like, down the middle. At that exact same moment, halfway across the country, their mother in the hospital wakes up screaming bloody murder, saying, Bathsheba, my partner wanted to ask you about the Insidious series. I don't know if it's based in reality whatsoever. Do I believe that it totally could happen, some aspects of it? Yes. And what I mean by that is, okay, so this is the reason when it comes to online people, when they're like, oh yeah, I astral travel all the time, this is how I know the believers from the non-people, which is, what people don't understand is when you astral project, for one, the number one thing you need to work on before that are wards and protections, and this is why. You are projecting your spirit or soul, whatever term you want to use, out of your physical body, which means it is a hollow shell. So, what happens if you were to meditate or astral project and not make it back to your body? Right? Okay, so for one, I'm pretty sure it would put you into a coma. But then what happens, basically the entire story of the series, what happens if you were to send somebody in to retrieve that soul. Now, the reason I wanted to bring that, I'm glad you brought this up, and the reason I wanted to talk about this is because this is something a lot of people don't talk about that needs to be a warning, but you know how people are online. If we warn stuff, we're gatekeeping. Astral parasites. They can be a number of, like, a scale of 1 to 100, 1 being not so nasty, 100 being you're fucked. And what these are basically what they are. They're parasites. They are a type of energy. I don't believe they were ever, like, almost what we would think of germs, almost. Let's look at it that way. What we would think of germs that would get us sick, like a virus, basically, like the flu or a common cold, right? So what winds up happening is if you don't have the right protection and or if you stay in too long or if you just go in the wrong area, what winds up happening is you get it attached to you. And you can have multiple ones. I've had 2 attached to me, and it took me about 3.5 years to actually get it off of me. How do you know if you have one? I was told I have astral attachments. I'm glad you mentioned that. Okay, how to remove them. There are multiple different ways to remove them. Not that I'm an expert. Basically, that goes into a, I'm going to say a spiritual cleansing routine. I personally have never astral projected. I'm afraid of the idea and exactly what if my spirit doesn't make it back to my body. I'm going to cover both of these. Okay, so for one with astral projection, there's something very small and similar you can do. First, visualization is key with this, is because the number one thing you need to do is imagine a gold cord is solidly, fully wrapped around you, and it is connected to your spirit. Now, there's another practice that they used in Inception, the movie, to where, and Christopher Penczak also talks about this in his Temple of Witchcraft series, where you can actually get an object like a necklace or an actual figurine and use that to be your anchor to anchor you down. And then basically don't try to actually go too far. The few and only times that I've really done it, the first time I was laying on a trampoline in like middle of spring in Alabama, clear sky, and the guy that I was with, he taught me how to, and I just probably, I'd say 10 to 15 feet out of my body, and I wanted to go longer, but like I came back down. Secondly, just protections. You need as many protections. That can literally be runes and sigils written all over you. It can be oil. It can be necklaces. So there's how you do that. And then to get them off, the easiest way that I would suggest would create a cleansing ritual, a spiritual cleansing daily ritual or weekly ritual or regimen. There we go. So in other words, you're going to do multiple different types of cleansings, whether that's burning herbs, smoke cleansing, sound cleansing, shower, water cleansing. And then if you know anybody who can do Reiki and or any type of energy healing, also talk to them. It's when it comes to that type of thing, the person you're getting your source from, you need to believe them. Do I know of a surefire way to see or to actually like notify you if you have one? No, not really. And before everything that has happened in the past 3 years in the world has happened, I would obviously say, you know, maybe if you have anxiety that you've never had before, maybe if you've experienced small bits of depression, you went to a doctor and you don't have depression or anything like that, that would be a sign. The problem is, nowadays, we live in a world where, here recently, this study was released, and I've talked about it before, which is pandemic brain. Basically, due to everything that's going on right now, a lot of people have been experiencing mental health issues that they've never experienced before. And after studying it, they learned that due to everything that's going on, the constant bombardment of fear, anxiety, stress, worrying, it's causing inflammation in certain parts of the brain. So it's actually causing people to have mental issues that they've never had before. But that would be the normal thing. That would normally what I would tell people to do. But again, we live in a world now that's basically riddled with that. Now, a trick you could possibly do is to try to do an egg cleansing. But instead of like, from my understanding of an egg cleansing, you like ask the egg to absorb, which I do them. You ask the egg to absorb all your negative energy, and you crack it open. Try doing that, but specifically asking it to absorb any type of astral attachments, and then read the egg drop after that. What about cleansing? Would you be able to tell after doing a cleanse and reading your results? I believe you would be able to. When it comes to cleansing and actually seeing if things are on you, hands down, I always go with the egg cleansing because to me, with my ADHD, it helps me actually visualize it versus reading tarot cards or oracle cards because of the like bias of my own brain. So if you do think that, and if you know somebody who can do those types of readings, I would go to them or have somebody that is non-biased. For me, the pandemic is like weed. It's just another whatever mental disorder you already have, just to be tenfold. This is true too. But yeah, try to go to somebody that would be non-biased and or go to almost a stranger, but that stranger also has like a good tie with reading. Because, and the reason that I say that is because if you're like me, one of the reasons I can read people with cards very well. But when it comes to reading myself, I can't because my own biased, anxiety-ridden brain is in there. And it's weird because when I go to do spells for people or cleansings or anything like that or readings for people, I've weirdly enough, it's like I disassociate from my own emotions and my own brain, and it's like, all right, we're good. And then after that, I go back to my normal self. So it's a way that I've taught myself to disconnect from my own distractions. That way, when I do sit down and read somebody, there's no anxiety. Which is one of the reasons I'm slowly working towards being able to do live readings versus what I do now. But I mean, if I would also say if you've never astral projected knowingly you've done it, I don't believe you would have any type of astral leeches or parasites. Now, an interesting fact, though, is some people actually astral project in their sleep without realizing it. And or it's called dream walking. Depending on who you ask, it's the same thing, but depending on who you ask, you may get a different thing. And that's when, like, so say you go to sleep at a normal time, like you know your own body. You go to sleep at a normal time. There's nothing that's really stressing you out, and you sleep through the night. But then you wake up and it literally feels like you've gotten absolutely no sleep whatsoever. That's where most people believe that they astral project and or dream walk. So in other words, your physical body is resting, but you're out doing, whatever you're doing outside of your body energetically. I used to know somebody that every night before they went to sleep, they would crack their window open because they would actually astral project into an animal, a crow, and just go do their thing. And yes, that is a thing. There are some people that believe that when you astral project, you don't necessarily have to stay in your body. Some people have also tied this with like spirit guides as animal guides, as transitioning into that animal. That also, I believe, stems from the folklore of how witches have their familiars and or fetches. Now, with that being said, I also wanted to kind of tie it back. Before you try, if you were interested in possibly reaching out to the Witch Father, please do research. The reason that I'm saying that is because depending on what book you read, one of the main places to meet them is at the Crossroads. Now, with the Crossroads, if you've never worked with them, you need to make sure you're doing a lot of protection. I feel like I accidentally learned how to astro because as a child I wanted so badly to leave traumatic stuff that I only felt free in my out-of-body experiences. You actually just fucked me up with that because that actually makes sense. Because it would be like a survival mechanism for... It's like detaching, but literally having an out-of-body experience from it. Well, now you just sent me down a rabbit hole. Thank you for that. Seriously, though, thank you, because I love doing these. But, possibly very true. Which is also something that I've commonly recently seen. A lot of practitioners that I'm seeing now... What cat are you? Sorry, I'm seeing a grayish cat that I've never seen before. Okay. But a lot of practitioners from like my age range and before that I've met recently, they've all experienced some type of trauma as a kid. Sorry, this cat's fucking with me because it looks like Mama Cat, the one that just had the kittens. Well, I say that and she had it on Halloween. But it looks more gray. And I don't have gray cats. Anyways, ADD moment. But with the crossroads or even going to a cemetery and or a graveyard, if you don't have the right protections on you, you can bring back what is known as a hitchhiker. Kind of along the same lines as a parasite, basically. It's a leech. It's something or a spirit that basically it's drawing energy from you. But especially with the crossroads, you definitely, when it comes to spirits and reading energy, you definitely need to make sure you know what you're doing on that one. Because all throughout history on different types of magical practices, the crossroads are heavily associated with making deals and stuff like that. With that being said, if you want to work with the Witch Father, no, you do not have to sell your soul. If you want to work with infernals, I'll start saying that instead of demons. No, you do not have to sell your soul. You do not have to sell sex or anything like that. There's no contracts. There's no agreements. They don't work like that. That is a Christian concept. And or a folkloric concept. And if you meet a spirit that wants to make a deal with you, I would suggest not. With that, I've been asked, well, my deity wants some of my blood. You have to ask yourself, why would a divine being want your blood? Why would a divine being want your soul? It doesn't make sense. Now, I mean, as in, like, the famous jazz musician who went down to the crossroads and literally overnight blew the fuck up and then mysteriously died. That would be a reason that people would make deals. But at the same time, I mean, I've worked with, I'm not going to call it a demon, when I was younger and thought I knew what I was doing. I started working with the spirit, and let's just say I fully understand the term of a trickster spirit. Oh, wow, my cats are so fucking weird. So, found out what cat it was. It's one of my black ones who decided she wanted to apparently take a dust bath, and now she's just covered with white sand. Yep, definitely my cat. But I used to work with one, and it should have been a red flag for me, but again, I was fucking 11, 12, 13. And I started getting, like, every single thing that I needed. But every single time I got that, I would lose something else. So it was kind of that, yeah, I'm getting everything I want, but at what price for it? And then it took me a while to fully cut that connection. And let's just say that I won't go back. Hello, your cat said, look at me, Fire Lotus, I'm the children. I guess so. It's so weird, though. I've never seen her do that before. And now she's hunting. Amanda, I will call you back and or text you when I get done. I'm so sorry. Sorry about that. I know that was random. I had somebody send me a package, and it was delayed, and then it was supposed to be delivered, but what I think happened is, we have, lockers as our mailboxes, like community ones, so they're like these tiny ones, and then we have 3 sections for packages. Well, those are only accessed by key, and I believe our mail person had put the key that was supposed to go to my package in the wrong mailbox. And all of our houses are very far. They're not like, you can't randomly just scroll up. So the person who sent it to me has been on the phone with the UPS trying to figure out what the fuck's going on. So yeah, the mail here recently has just gone to shit. But yeah, those are red flags. If you start working with an energy and they start asking for things, and then they're like, you know, hey, if you give me this, then I'll give you that. That is a major red flag. And from my understanding, even the, what most people call darker deities, they're not going to ask for your blood. They shouldn't ask for your blood anyways, because I would, unless it was like a devotee thing, which I still know. But there are also a lot of trickster spirits that are out there, whether these were human spirits that, well, they're still spirits, they will trick you. They will deceive you. So, like, always, it's just like messing with a Ouija board. Should you? Yes, no. just know what you're doing and make sure you have an extra line of protection while doing them. And then with that as well, like, there's this saying on Witch Talk where, like, a lot of practitioners are just, I said it would contact 1 to 3 business days, or that if I hadn't got a call within 3 days, I'd have to service request a number and a follow what's going on. Okay. There's this saying that a lot of practitioners online, they're not actually working with deities, they're working with egregores. Hold on. Bubbers. No, stop. I have stuff up here. And it very well could be. It very well could be, because now the way that witchcraft is, and due to online, it's easier to create an egregore. Theoretically, easier to create an egregore, and then just constantly feed that. But, I mean, at the same time, how are we to say who's working with the deity and who's not? Because at the end of the day, I believe, and a lot of people will not agree with this, but I believe that all deities are archetypes. That's all they are. I mean, I'm not saying they're not divine, because obviously they are, but in a sense, depending on how you view divine energy, they were all egregores at one point in time. I almost said Hecate. If I'm not mistaken historically, and I could be wrong, when it comes to, like, the gods and goddesses that are most worked with, I think I want to say Hecate is one of the oldest ones that we know as in archaeologist evidence that is in the mainstream gods and goddesses that people work with. Now, I definitely understand that there are way older ones than her. Fully understand that, but from my understanding, she's one of the oldest that are still being worked with. But yeah, it's just be smart and safe. And then do research, obviously, because, again, there are hundreds of people who don't believe the devil was in witchcraft, and here's one book to prove them wrong. But yeah, I think that's going to be it. Sorry, I'm slightly scatterbrained because after this, I've got 2 readings to do, and then I have a uncrossing to prep for tonight. I will be uploading a video on here shortly. It's only going to be like 1 to 2 minutes of a cord cutting ceremony that I did the other day. Very interesting one. This is the most interesting one that I've ever had, because, and I'm not giving any names or anything like that, male and female, left and right. The male broke he actually cut the cord, which I've never seen. And then their candles, like, matched perfectly with the energy and the flames. It was very cool. But yes, I also hope you have a great day too. I should be on tomorrow. I don't know what time though, because I also have another spell that I have to do for a customer. But yeah, I think that's gonna do it for now. Again, I have a Discord, Instagrams, and if y'all ever need me, either email me, hit me up on my Facebook page, and or if we're mutuals, on my TikToks, and or directly through Instagram. I always respond to those messages. And if you're following me on my main account, for some reason TikTok's being stupid and I cannot actually add my link tree to it. So if you do need my link tree, just go to my second account or here. And my link tree is Fire Lotus the Witch anyways. And then the Facebook link does not work, so you're going to have to manually Fire Lotus the Witch on Facebook. But yeah, until then, I will see y'all later, and if y'all want to book a reading with me or anything like that, book it through Instagram and or my Facebook page. And yeah, until then, I will see y'all later. Peace.